And so I'm going to move into the final segment for today, which is the more novel agents. Obviously, we have the novel combinations. We were all very pleased to see the candor data that we've touched upon, Dara-Kyprolis-Dex at ASH. And some of the other combinations, the iberdomide, the new IMiD-like agent from Celgene, now BMS, exciting new data. The melphalan, the melflufan new agent, and then an unusual lipid raft radionuclide option. But I think that without a doubt, what we can touch on at the end, just to give some very, very positive news for our listeners, is just to touch on what we heard about the immune therapies, the CAR T therapies, the bispecific T-cell engagers, and then the monoclonal drug conjugates, particularly the belamaf, the GSK compound. And so if we take them one at a time, I think that the presentation of the Cartitude study, which was the results of the Janssen trial, and Janssen had taken over the results from the Chinese Legend data. And so I think that everyone was extremely pleased to see the very positive results with the CAR T product based on the Legend product. And it was presented by Deepu Maduri. And she made this interesting point during her presentation that actually 100% of the patients did respond, and that the toxicity was really remarkably good, and so that we do need to pay attention to a treatment where all the patients at least benefit somewhat, and a majority of them have really quite deep responses. And so this was followed later by another ASH abstract looking at the T-cell engager from Celgene, now BMS, the CC93249. And this was a dose response study presented by Luciana Costa. And on this graph here, moving from the bottom to the top on slide 26, you can see that very, very nice dose response relationship with excellent deep responses with significant benefit using this T-cell engager, linking the T-cells with the myeloma cell to enhance that anti-myeloma benefit. And then we also had results from the GSK product. I didn't show the slide here, but also a 67% response with the GSK monoclonal antibody drug conjugate. And so we clearly have major activity with these exciting new immune therapies in the relapse patient population. In this case, I selected the ones which are targeted against B-cell maturation antigen, the BCMA targeted therapy. And so big questions about how we see these new approaches moving forward. And so, Paul, I think that maybe you could comment first, and then maybe Yelak, you can be ready to jump in as to how you view this from the patient perspective. So Paul, do you want to comment first about these various amazing new immune therapies? Paul must be muted, I guess. I don't know. Someone asked a question while we're waiting. Someone asked a question about BiTEs. The T-cell engagers have different names. The one that came from Amgen is called a BiTE. The one that comes from Celgene and BMS is called a T-cell engager. So there are different words and names for these T-cell products.
Brian, I'm so sorry that I am back on. The organizer kindly unmuted me, Richard.
No worries. And so maybe just give your broad perspective about these exciting data, and how do we view this moving forward? Obviously, we are so happy that patients with relapse refractory disease have been able to benefit and have remissions on an average of about 1 year. But how do we look at this moving forward?
It's a great question, Brian, and I think the important message for our patients is that, you know, after CD38 targeting, we've now got a whole armamentarium that can go after BCMA, which is a very important marker in myeloma. A critical point is that the CAR T therapies have gone from strength to strength. We've got the efficacy of the BB2121 platform that's now well established, and in that same setting, establishing platforms from it that actually can generate memory potentially, and so enhance durability of potentially of disease control. And as you very nicely outlined, Brian, there's the excellent data from the Janssen team, the CARTITUDE studies, led by some super investigators who've done some very nice work. I think the important message about the GSK platform, which it's been a privilege to be part of actually, is its off-the-shelf capability. I mean, you can just pluck it out of the pharmacy, as it were, and infuse patients every 3 weeks. It's a relatively well-tolerated infusion in my experience, and it's very active. You kindly touched on the DREAM-1 data, where we saw a very solid response rate, around 60%, as you pointed out. In the truly penta-refractory population, you know, in whom all treatments had unfortunately failed them, we saw about a 35% response rate in that group of patients, if one looks at it overall, because there were actually 2 dose levels explored. But my point is that it's a very important new platform, and I think that as you think about CAR T and you think about GSK, we've got 2 potentially very exciting new approvals this year, if all goes well, for these agents. So I think it's tremendous. One thing that is worth noting is that I mentioned earlier that MRD negative disease after CAR T appears to be somewhat unstable. And I think that in that regard, strategies aimed at maintaining response are absolutely critical. And there are a variety of ways that can be done, both immunologically as well as thinking about new maintenance agents. One point that we touched on earlier was the sort of stemness that's such an important part of this in the disease, that is. And you touched earlier on the drug melflufen, and it's actually a very, very important new agent, in my opinion, for potentially going after this. It is a sort of great granddaughter of melphalan, and it may actually be able to target the stemness without the toxicities that we see from traditional melphalan. So I think BCMA, very exciting. Some challenges with stemness in BCMA targeting. On the one hand, for CAR T, perhaps maintenance is the way to go. For GSK, because it combines a chemotherapeutic, it actually may have a little bit more control on the stemness, perhaps. We don't know, but possible. And then there are newer strategies going for stemness as well.
Very, very good. Yeah. So Yelak, from a patient perspective, what's the level of excitement? What is the thinking or prioritization and thinking about CAR T, a BiTE or a T-cell engager, and the GSK product, which is off the shelf and most likely will be approved rather soon?
Yeah, I think this is a really hopeful time for myeloma patients, and there is a feeling that the future is very hopeful. But I think, as you both mentioned, none of these therapies are yet curative, and more research needs to be done, and tweaking of the CARs need to happen over a period of time, hopefully sooner than later. And I think a lot of the struggle that I'm hearing from patients that have gone through these therapies and the therapy has failed them is they don't know what to do next. So there is a need for clinical trials that are, in my opinion, bold and takes the patients that have been treated by one of these drugs and put them in some sort of clinical therapy.
Right. I sense that as well, already seeing patients in that situation. Maybe we can cycle back to that. Rafat, do you want to comment first about the positioning of these, and then perhaps we can touch on what's available for a patient who may relapse on one of these therapies? Rafat?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I mean, I think, last decade was the decade of Revlimid and Velcade, the immunomodulatory drugs and proteasome inhibitor. I think this is a decade of immunotherapy. It is fascinating to be able to take patient own immune cells and make them a myeloma killer cells. It's incredible. And, we are at the start of this era. We just starting. So I think the technology is going to get better. We're going to use them probably earlier. They're going to be more specific. They're going to be more safe. They're going to be more sustained. I think it's just an incredible. And, the conjugate antibodies, the BCMA conjugate is also incredible. I mean, we're blessed to be able to be part of these clinical trials to see how quickly you're getting a response. So I think it is exciting time. It's really exciting because we're going to have these amazing technology, conjugated antibody CAR T cells, bispecific T cell engager that will be part of our treatment. And I think they will be moving forward into clinical trials for, upfront. We don't have to wait too late to use these drugs. If we're going to start thinking about a cure, we want to get rid of myeloma. Getting rid of myeloma is the first thing. Putting patient into a CR, complete remission, putting them in MRD negative, minimal residual disease negative state, and sustain, that's what's going to cure people. So it is very exciting to see these drugs, available to the patients. And I'm sure a couple of them will be approved this year. We just have to figure out how we're going to use them, how we're going to use them better. So, it's just an exciting time. I mean, there are a lot of clinical trials going on that we have, Farber has, everybody has, that will addressing the patients who have relapse on the monoclonal antibodies and the like. So it's not the end of the world. I think it's just an exciting time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a couple of questions came in. One of them, is there any update on CRISPR? I think that at ASH, there was the preliminary data using the CRISPR technology to modify T cells. This was from the University of Pennsylvania, presented by Ed Stadmeyer. And so certainly, I think that this CRISPR technology can be used to gene edit T cells and enhance them in a variety of ways. And so this is just one of the other approaches that is exciting at this point in time. Another question is, do we track soluble BCMA in the blood, and there are some data on that, but I don't believe any of us are doing that in any kind of routine way. Would anyone like to comment on that? Is anyone tracking BCMA in the blood at this point?
Not routinely, Brian. I would say that it's a very interesting research question, because obviously you touched on the very important point, and Yelak brought it out. What do you do when BCMA targeted therapy fails a patient? Where do we go next?
Right.
And I think it's an important construct, because knowing what the BCMA target may be doing may be very relevant. Interestingly, in the CAR T space, there was this focus on the degree of expression of BCMA and its importance, and that seemed to sort of actually not be quite as linear as you might think, that in fact BCMA underexpressing patients did also respond. So it's a complex question. I think the important message to echo on Rafat's comments is that after BCMA targeting therapy does run out of steam, I do want to emphasize for patients, we have options. As you know, Brian, selinexor-based therapy after CAR T failure was effective. And in the same spirit, we touched on melflufen in the current single-arm phase 2 trial after CAR T failure. We've seen responses from melflufen-based approaches. So we have strategies that can go after this. But I do agree it's a very important area, and Yelak nailed it by saying, we need to be looking at this very proactively, and we most certainly are. The one thing I would stress here in the CAR T space after CAR T treatment that's so exciting to me, as you talked about it earlier, Brian, are the cell mods, the so-called CT220 and CT480, and very interestingly, there do appear to be responses to these cell mods after CAR T therapy. So it's very important for patients to hear that we really are going after this area. And in there, perhaps lies a clue that, after targeting perhaps maintenance with either 220 or 480 may be a very important strategy going forward.
Very, very good. Yes, yes. Another question which we can touch on is, are we making progress in making these therapies safer, both CAR T and BiTEs or T-cell engagers? And so I'll just comment that it was actually quite nice to see that in the CARTITUDE study, that Legend product, the safety profile was really rather good. But I would also say with the BB2121 platform, the tolerance has been good moving forward with some adjustments of management of CRS and the like. And obviously there was another study presented, a Chinese study, which had a built-in safety switch within the engineered T cells. So any thoughts about the safety of these immune therapies?
Well, Brian, I would just...
Brian,
sorry, Rafat, you go first. Go ahead, yeah, please.
That's fine. What I'm saying is that I think we, current CAR T cells, the signals, looks encouraging. I just want to let you know that there are several companies that are coming up with CAR T cells with really the goal, two things: improve specificity, make sure that you're getting the right target and you're eradicating the myeloma that, and the second one is to improve safety. So I'm excited that there are several companies working on both the CAR T cells and the bispecific T cell engager. And I'm sure we're gonna nail a couple of those that will be very effective and also very safe.
Right. Yes, I fully agree.
I would echo that. I would say also, Brian, that obviously new strategies to CRS beyond the IL-6 antibodies are being developed because they can be very important in reducing some of the issues that surround the CRS and neurological syndrome. But I absolutely agree with Rafat that the newer approaches may be particularly promising. I am struck that the BB2121 platform seems very safe, actually, in the larger studies that have been done. But I do think, like all of these things, you unleash the immune system, you have to be extremely careful. And the Legend platform clearly is more potent, but I think it's important to keep a beady eye on that one going forward from the point of view of, so for example, using it in older patients, maybe perhaps
exactly.
That's important. For GSK, I did want to add one very important point, Brian, which is this ocular toxicity that had been a worry for the platform. I will stress that with dose and schedule adjustment, that has become much less of a worry. And the combination trials, which we'll be hearing more about this coming year at the various meetings, are really exciting in that regard. When you combine 916 with other drugs, the keratopathy, which is what it is, particularly if you go with lower doses of GSK, really doesn't become the issue that it was when we were just using it as part of monotherapy. And the other good news is that we've learned a lot about the ocular toxicity and have got really nice mitigation strategies built around dose and schedule, and most of all that can make it a very manageable approach.
Absolutely, and I think it is really exciting to have that off-the-shelf option moving forward with a likelihood of approval and with a management strategy, a mitigation strategy for the ocular toxicity. There is another question here about using a BCMA-targeted approach for first relapse versus one of the novel triplets that we were talking about. My sense is that we're probably not quite there yet with these therapies in a first relapse setting, unless possibly for a really refractory patient. We would certainly need some trials in that setting first. Yep.
Yeah, Brian. There are ongoing clinical trials trying to also address, some of these novel approaches such as BCMA CAR T cells in first relapse that happening in the first year or first 18 months, because obviously we know that early relapse after good treatment indicate that there's a high risk myeloma, difficult myeloma.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to test these novel agents in that setting. And I think we will learn from the ongoing trials whether this is effective or not.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so I think we're coming towards the end of this, what I think has been a really, really fruitful session, touching on a lot of very important points. And so I'm coming to my final slide here, which I summarize some expectations for 2020. The GSK molecule we just talked about, we are expecting that it would be approved. Also, for the BB212 and the Legend CAR T platforms, both of those are moving forward with the potential for approval. Also, the melflufen, we're hopeful that there will be an approval for that. The exciting results coming out of ASH, the quadruplet studies, DARA VTD, the Cassiopeia, DARA VRD, the Griffin trial, DARA KRD, and then also we are using KRD and DARA KRD in the what we call the CURE trials for high-risk smoldering myeloma, which we didn't really talk about today, but those results will be coming forward in 2020. And then the new agents, the cell mods and this I-131 molecule, which does have some value in relapse refractory patients, and other agents in this really, really active myeloma space, which is exciting for all of us to be a part of, which is something emphasized by Rafat. And so with that, I think that we're moving towards the witching hour here, or witching 2 hours. And so perhaps I'll go down our panelists here for some final thoughts for the day before we close this special go-to webinar session. So yeah, Paul, would you like to go first?
Sure, or if Yelak would like to go first, whichever, or Rafat, what do you think, Bram? Would you like me to just some...
Oh, well, whoever wants to jump in. Yelak, well, you want to go first? Yeah.
Well, as a patient, I'll jump in.
So you jump in.
This is a very hopeful time for us patients, and I think a great time to be a myeloma doctor and a myeloma researcher. And Dr. Durie, as you dived deeper into the presentation, I couldn't help but notice the increased options and related complexities of being able to decide what to do next. So I believe with that increased option and increased complexity comes a responsibility for you as a myeloma experts to consider patients' options and opinions, and for us patients to be able to articulate our needs and be an informed participants in our care. So I think it is really important to be able to consult with a myeloma expert, but more importantly, not just consult, but build a long-term relationship with a myeloma expert, so the myeloma experts can direct our care based on our choices, including clinical trials.
I fully agree. This concept of joint decision making is so important, because the efficacy, the benefit, the convenience, all these different things, it's the patient who is the consumer, and we need to have that as a central part of all of our discussions. And so Rafat or Paul, whoever would like to go next.
So I think, I look at dealing with myeloma is really a teamwork, so you got the patient, you got the caregiver, you got, the treating physician, the nurses, the myeloma expert. I think we need all these, people together partnering toward, really helping the patient get the best treatment for them, because I think each myeloma is unique and each patient is unique, and to have goals of therapy that are clear, I think, today it's just amazing. We bless how many drugs we have and how many combinations we have.
Right.
We just have to use them in correct way with clear, and again, clinical trials are very important. I encourage my patients to participate in those. That's how we're going to make progress. I think we should be bold. We should start thinking about clinical trials that aim to cure the patients. I mean, I think this is a great time. We shouldn't be shy of trying to design the right clinical trials to hopefully get patient into a lasting complete remission. That's how you cure patients, a lasting complete remission. So we need to start thinking about that. It's the time. But again, it takes a team from the patient. We need to, listen to the patient, listen to the caregiver, engage the nurses, the treating physician, the myeloma expert to try to provide the best care possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some questions have come in related to this aspect of attempting to cure myeloma, which you didn't really touch on today, but the ASCENT trial, which actually Rafat is a part of, is ongoing in the U.S. using daratumumab KRD in patients with high-risk smoldering, and this has been moving ahead strongly now, and the results of that, how successful we are in achieving an MRD undetected status, we'll be able to have preliminary results on that this year. Also, another black swan project.
On that trial,
yes.
As you know, Brian.
Yes.
The first patient
yes.
is just to tell people, it's a 2-year therapy, and we stop. And so the
yes.
first patient has 1 more month left in the 2 years therapy.
All right.
Doing great.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Yes. So go ahead, Paul. Yes.
Yeah, very, very briefly. I'll just echo everything that you so kindly said, and Yelak, and of course Rafat. My final comment would be that we're blessed now to be sitting on 11 drugs approved, 3 drugs coming in a modality this year. That will generate for us, because one drug we didn't mention was venetoclax, and that may well be approved this year as well. So we may be sitting on 14 and plus 1, that'll be 15 modalities and treatments going forward. So I do agree. I think that the construct of achieving durable remissions that will last decades are potentially within grasp. And I think in that spirit, thinking strategically as well as tactically is so important. And I think both Yelak and Rafat touched on it beautifully. The essence of teamwork is key. I just wanted to close by thanking you, Brian, in particular, and Susie and the IMF team for making such a fabulous webinar possible today. And the last comment I'd make is please everyone be safe and get through this very challenging time with COVID-19. I'm very hopeful for us in the future, but we must be very careful now.
Thank you so much for that. Your cautions in the times for us. And just a final comment on the big picture that was asked here. We have the Black Swan Iceland project where we're looking at this other aspect of myeloma, which is the early evolution of the disease, the development of MGUS and smoldering myeloma, what is causing that, and how we can intervene even earlier to try to make a difference. And so for that questioner, this project is moving forward strongly, and again, there will be updates during this year. And so let me just say, again, very, very difficult times. I hope that we were able to help you with questions that you might have about the impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus, and that we have given you some hope and helpful advice about all of the great options that are indeed available for patients with myeloma.